You know, I'm not sure this is going to work unless Warner Brothers figures out a way to obliviate the memory of the original film series. Hey, folks, I'm gonna do something I haven't done in a long time, which is talk about the Harry Potter franchise and not talk about J.K. Rowling. Now, before I get into this, and let me make it very clear, I am on the record repeatedly in many places as having massive issues with J.K. Rowling. And frankly, I don't think anybody should be supporting her products or anything that is attached to her name at this point. But that is well established about me, and it is definitely not the focus of this video. I'm actually strictly going to be speaking about the Harry Potter property as a property. And in terms of what has leaked that appears to be the next phase of plans for what Warner Brothers wants to do with that property, and what those plans say about the state of it. Because I find that very interesting, and I don't need to get into all the issues with the original creator in order to talk about this. So, while I am certainly no champion of Harry Potter, keep in mind that at this point, I'm going to be having this conversation about what we have found out that Warner Brothers seems to be planning and my thoughts on it, and they basically have nothing to do with her. So, what was found out? Well, while it has not been confirmed yet, and from what I can tell, only because contracts have not been finalized, but what has been reported by multiple, generally pretty reliable sources, that is always important to know. Like, some outlets are more reliable than others, but fairly reliable ones that at least seem to have better vetting than some of the less scrupulous ones have been reporting that HBO, under Warner Brothers, is attempting to finalize a deal to do a TV series adaptation of the original 7 Harry Potter books with the intention of doing a full season per book. They're basically kind of pulling a Game of Thrones on it, is what they appear to be trying to do. And as I said, I think this says some very interesting things about the current state of the franchise. Because to kind of skip to the end a little bit, this reads like a desperation move. And me saying that just has to do with how Harry Potter's currently working out for Warner Brothers, which is not as well as they would like. They don't like to bring it up now, but when the Fantastic Beasts series of films started, there were supposed to be 5 of them. There won't be. I will be shocked if they do a 4th one, because every single one of those 3 films had a $200 million budget. That's not including the marketing, so who knows what they actually spent on it. But each one made notably less money than the one before. First one pulled in over $800 million. Second one pulled in a bit over 6. Third one, it was about $400 million. It was dropping by significant increments, and it was costing them the same amount of money to do it every time. You don't keep doing that. That's once you get to the third one and it is dropped off by even more than it dropped off from the first to the second, you don't continue that trajectory. Maybe you do the third one, and they did, because you hope, well, maybe people just didn't like the second one as much. And if the third one's better, maybe they'll come back. Whether or not it's better, I don't know. I never watched that one, because by then, all the stuff with Rowling came out. But that was probably their hope in doing the third Fantastic Beasts. But it didn't. It made even less. And so it would be a very foolish thing for them to continue on with that franchise, given the complete downward trajectory that the returns have had on that. What else do they have? Well, I'm sure they would love nothing more than to get back the core original cast, Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson and Rupert Grint, and have them come back and do a film version of The Cursed Child. That's the play, sort of the unofficial 8th Harry Potter book. But that was the play that was done in the UK. And that's not going to happen. I mean, first of all, I don't think I ever talked about it. I might have. I can't remember if I ever talked about that play on here. I have read it. It's quite bad. Like, and I don't even mean like just in terms of, oh, and it ruined characters. Like, no, just narratively, structurally, it's a mess, and it breaks the established rules of the universe really badly. It's not a good story. But if they could reassemble, kept trying, I know I'd find the word, reassemble that original cast, that might be enough of a selling point to be able to get away with a movie adaptation of that play. That won't work, however, because it is very difficult to imagine that all of them would be willing to come back, especially Daniel Radcliffe, who at this point has spoken out directly in opposition to J.K. Rowling's statements and has even been doing work, I believe, with the Trevor Project lately. He's made his stance pretty clear. And while, yes, he did come back for sort of the anniversary celebration thing that was on HBO, that was more reminiscing of what he'd already done, and I would not take that as an indicator of what he's going to do in future, especially given the kind of roles the guy's been taking. He clearly doesn't take a role just because, well, I need the money. He's had a very eclectic filmography since Harry Potter ended. He seems to do what he wants to do, and given everything going on, I have a hard time believing that he would want to come back and do this, and since he doesn't seem to be someone who does something just for the money, I don't think they get him. I don't think they get Emma Watson either. Rupert Grint, maybe. But if they're not going to get all three back, there would be no point. That would be the big pitch of doing The Cursed Child. So they can't do The Cursed Child. There's really not any good financial prospect in doing more Fantastic Beasts movies. There is the Hogwarts Legacy video game, which did do very well. But a couple things about that. The first is that video games take a long time to make and develop. And unless you start cranking them out on an assembly line, in which case you end up with garbage and people catch on to that dang quick, usually, then it's going to be another 4 or 5 years before they can get one of those. And they need other stuff out the door to justify them continuing to pay the licensing fee for the Harry Potter IP. That's the first thing. The other thing is, I do have to wonder if over at Warner Brothers, if some of them are afraid that when they eventually get around to another Harry Potter video game, if they're not a little worried about a repeat of the Fantastic Beasts thing. Because what appears to have happened, if I were to just sort of sit back and make a guess as to the general sense of disinterest, there is, yes, obviously, just the stuff with Rowling. But again, we're not dealing with that. But beyond that, the Fantastic Beasts movies, the first one, obviously that was kind of exciting, like, ooh, different aspects of this world. A lot of people came and saw that, and it was okay. There was some potential. Not as many people came back the second time. That did even less coherent stuff with the potential and the concepts, and then people didn't even bother coming back to the third one. There is a possibility that Hogwarts Legacy got as big a boost and did as well as it did for the novelty. There has not been a game like that set in the world of Harry Potter, set in Hogwarts. And on novelty alone, just getting to play that kind of game in that kind of setting, that carries a lot of weight. Whether or not the rest of it is so good that people will come back even after the novelty is worn off, they won't know until they get to another one, and maybe not. And even if people do come back in the same kind of numbers, like I said, 4 or 5 years, if they're going to take the time to fully develop it, maybe a little bit less, maybe more in the 3-year time span if they end up reusing a lot of assets from the first one. I suppose there's that. But again, that's longer than Warner Brothers will want to wait to get returns on this. Now, here's the funny thing about doing a TV adaptation of the books. Taking the full context of everything else out, just as an adaptation, that's probably a better way to adapt those books. Because the movies, as beloved as they are, had to cut a lot. And a lot of stuff that was cut is the sort of thing that a TV series has the breathing room to do. Mainly, I'm talking about the classroom stuff, the dynamics of the students, separate from the major plot beats, getting to know more of the student body, more of the professors, just spending more time in a day-to-day and not just dealing with only the major bullet points, especially in the latter ones of here's the major crisis, so we got to deal with all that stuff, and we don't have time for class stuff. You can practically forget that they're even in a school in the first place because of the confines of a movie runtime. And a TV series would give them the breathing room to have all that stuff in. And while you could argue that that stuff wasn't strictly necessary to the plots, which obviously it wasn't, the movies managed to get by without a lot of it, but it was part of the flavor of those books. And keep in mind, before everything went to hell with Rowling, I was a fan of those books. So, I can appreciate that those things have appeal. And the ability to bring those in and add them into the mix and give it a more fleshed out and lived in feel than the movies would be able to do, that is probably, potentially, assuming you get good people attached to it, going to lead to a better adaptation of the original work that captures more of what is appealing about it than the movies would be able to do. It still reads as a desperation move, though, because here's the thing. The movies, while some of them have aged better than others, the first two don't hold up very well, and I think some of them are overrated, but as a whole, collectively, those 8 films, they're beloved. And remaking something that's beloved, that is tricky, especially when the thing that's beloved is an adaptation that is praised for its accuracy. Because like I said, while the TV show adaptation could bring in what was cut, in terms of what we've already seen, there isn't a lot that they could do to make it more book accurate for the things it did adapt. And so you'll have more, but will it be better? And when it comes to remakes and reboots, doing it on something that is beloved is treacherous. And I know it can seem a little bit like a long time since the films ended, but it wasn't that long ago. I think it was 2010 the last one came out. So right now we're coming on 13 years. And that is not an insignificant amount of time. And we've certainly had reboots in shorter time frames than that. Look at all the Spider-Man reboots. But here's the thing about something like the Spider-Man reboots. They happened as quickly as they did because the ones that were left behind to then be rebooted again either had fallen apart on hard times or just were never that beloved to begin with. What I mean by that is, while there is a hell of a lot of love for the first 2 Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, Spider-Man 3 rubbed so many people the wrong way that while the reboot did feel like that came really fast, it also kind of made sense to a certain degree. But then The Amazing Spider-Man, neither of those movies was really that great. And so rebooting again and being like, just try again, because there wasn't a definitive, iconic adaptation of Spider-Man. So you could do something else. Besides which, Spider-Man, by his nature, because the character has been reinvented so much in the comics over time, you can pull from different core sources. Like the Sam Raimi ones are very much an adaptation of the 60s and 70s era of Spider-Man. And the Amazing Spider-Man feels a bit more akin to some of the 90s stuff in a lot of ways, while still having him in high school, which they shouldn't have done. But that's a tangent. And then Tom Holland sort of brought it up to a more modern sensibility. And so there was a different fundamental feel. But again, those movies captured the feel of the books almost perfectly in terms of, again, what they did choose to adapt. Why are they doing this? Because there is no way that they are going to be able to put these out there and not have them compared to the movies potentially unfavorably, especially if any of the core cast is not as good. And you need to realize people are going to have massive nostalgia blinders on for that original series of films. So not only would the new cast have to be as good, they'd have to be significantly better, because they have to overcome not only the talent of the original cast, both the students and the teachers, but they're going to have to overcome people's nostalgia for them. And while I would expect that a first season of a Harry Potter show would probably do gangbusters, I'd also wonder how fast would it drop off? Because a first season, people would see, how's it different? What's new? How are the new actors? But then once you know, unless you decide it's all better than the original, why would you come back? You know how it happens. Are they ever going to get anybody to play Snape as iconically as Alan Rickman did? Could there ever be a McGonagall as iconic as Maggie Smith? I mean, this is part of why I think the smartest thing that Amazon Prime did when doing its Lord of the Rings series, whatever you think of that, I think one of the smartest things they did was to deal vastly with unknown characters and characters we hadn't seen before. Because how do you recast Gandalf? I don't know if you'd be able to do it. And it's not because nobody else could be good in the part, but Ian McKellen's so beloved in that role. How's it ever going to be worth trying. And that's kind of where the Harry Potter films are at for a lot of fans, casual and hardcore. Like, those films got as many people into Harry Potter as the books themselves did. Some people started with the movies, then found the books. Plenty of people came to the books first, but like the two, they fed into each other. They built each other up. So why am I saying this is a desperation move? And why are they doing it if it seems like a bit of an artistically doomed thing? Because the healthiest thing artistically for this thing to do would be to add in the kind of material that was cut, but also take some notable differences, some notable changes in character, maybe even in plot, so that it can be its own thing and not just be we're remaking the movies, but it's like we're adding in a season of television worth of deleted scenes. Because who's going to stick around for that for more than a season? I mean, some people will, but not as many for how expensive it's going to be to try and do this. So, why? As I said, the reboot just seems like you have not given enough time for the films to kind of fade, if they ever will. Well, they're doing it because what the hell else are they going to do at this point? They tried spinning off new stories set in the same world with Fantastic Beasts, diminishing returns almost immediately. The video game thing, as I said, has its own hurdles in terms of how long it takes, and that may or may not result in diminishing returns as well. What do you do? Because the thing you need to remember is that when you are talking about the mentalities of corporate executives, they run kind of the same way an algorithm does, almost entirely on precedent. They will make a decision based off what worked before. And what didn't work over, past the first one was a new series of films with different characters. Okay, that didn't work. The video games, maybe they'll get more out of it, but they need to milk this property for more than just video games if they're going to get their full money's worth out of it. And they need to assure their investors that they are doing something with these properties. That is why when James Gunn announced his plans for the DC universe, it was like 5 years worth of plans. And he said, I haven't even told you everything. Like, I expressed my concern that as much as I like James Gunn and I like a fair amount of what he said he wants to do with it, that's a lot. And I immediately got flashbacks to back when Man of Steel came out, and then Warner Brothers announced at the time 5 years worth of films. You know what else they had announced around that same time? At that same time, Warner Brothers had said, we're not doing mid-budget movies anymore. We are doing blockbuster movies only, and we're doing them related to 3 properties: DC superheroes, Harry Potter, and Lego. Because the Lego movie had come out and been a huge smash hit. What happened to that third one? What happened to the Lego franchise? Diminishing returns happened. The Lego movie happened. People loved it, were annoyed at its Oscar snub. It made huge money. Then they did Lego Batman. Also very good. Great, even. Made a little bit less money. Then they did Lego Ninjago. Maybe not a great idea. Critics didn't really care for that one. Made even less money. And then they released the Lego Movie 2, which was the we have to make sure this property is still viable move. Because when the spin-offs that you've been doing are starting to, you do a new entry in the original sort of pillar franchise within this to reignite things, remind people why they love it, and just give the whole thing a kick in the rear. And then Lego Movie Part 2 underperformed. They made their money back, but it did not hit original Lego Movie numbers. It didn't even really come that close. And after that, they let the rights lapse. They said, screw it. The Lego Movie Part 2 should have been big on the scale of the first one. And the fact that we made a direct sequel to the biggest hit within this thing, and it still made even less money, we need to walk away because this entire thing is now diminishing returns. They're potentially in a similar position with Harry Potter right now because the spin-offs nosedived. I can't imagine they're looking to try and do more spin-offs because these films are expensive because of the effects and the creatures and the magic, and they often get very big names to be in these. So they can't cheaply try and do another spin-off. There, as I said, the video games, but there's the potential for more diminishing returns there. They would have loved to do the Chris Child because that could have been the kick in the rib for the whole franchise because we brought the team back together. But as I said, I will be shocked if they would ever be able to do that. In fact, I would almost be willing to bet money that they probably have sent out feelers to see if those core 3 actors would be willing to come back, and they got turned down by at least one, if not all of them. And that is why they are moving now to the TV series. Because when you can't milk spinoffs and you need more than this one other avenue, that being the video games, then what is there to do? Go back to what we know works, what we know made all the money, which was the original 7 books. But you can't remake those as movies because, dang, what would you even say is going to be different or better? Even vaguely. What is there to pitch? Oh, well, we'll do it as a TV show. Because, like, we can have full seasons and, like, it'll be more stuff. Like, yeah, it'll be more. But that's why I say it's a desperation move. This is Warner Brothers coming in and going, okay, what is the thing that we can do that is the closest to the thing that made us all the money back when we decided to go all in on this? Well, the thing that made them all the money were the original adaptations. So readapt the original work again. And I'm going to make a prediction right now. If this moves forward, if this TV show happens, and if it is not successful enough to finish its run, if it doesn't get a full 7 seasons, if the expense of producing it is so much that it's not worth it for the ratings they're getting to do the full 7 seasons and cover all 7 books, if that happens, Warner Brothers will let the rights return to J.K. Rowling, and they'll let it go. This is the franchise's last chance to prove to Warner Brothers that it will continue to sustain them. And they need it to do that. Part of the reason that they are announcing this much, as I said, is in regards to shareholders. Because there's a lot of concerns about Warner Brothers or Warner Brothers Discovery now. Because the news headlines for a while have been all the stuff they've been doing that's been ticking people off. Canceling stuff, canceling the release of entire movies like Batgirl, gutting stuff like all these planned Scooby-Doo movies, some of which were already finished. The canceling of all these shows, completely reorganizing HBOMax, merging it with Discovery Plus, layoffs, removal of stuff from the streaming service. All these things just look bad. And while on paper maybe they look okay because they're cutting costs, like nobody's been excited for what they've been up to until they could start announcing a bunch of new stuff for the properties they have access to that people love. So first we had DC, and it wasn't enough for James Gunn to say what's coming in the next few years. He had to announce 5 years worth of stuff. Very packed 5 years worth of stuff. And I'm sure that pressure came because they need to reassure the shareholders that they're not letting these properties sit idle, and they are gonna make back all of the weird wonkiness that has gone wrong. They're gonna make back not only the money, but the goodwill. And Harry Potter's their other big major franchise that they actually know what to do with. Because Warner Brothers owns a whole lot of other stuff that they could be doing things with that they just have never figured out what to do with. They haven't figured out what to do with Looney Tunes in decades. So, there's other stuff that they have, but as I said, they're thinking based off precedent. What was the stuff that made us the most money? Harry Potter is one of those things. But the fact that they're talking about or trying to get or negotiating or trying to finalize just adapting the books again, that to me says a lot about the state of Warner Brothers and the viability of milking more money out of these things. And that's not me saying Harry Potter is going to disappear. I don't expect it to anytime soon. People still love the books. People still love the movies. So it's not like it's suddenly going to fade away. But for an entity like Warner Brothers to have it be worth them paying the licensing fee for it, they can't just be pulling in residuals from people streaming the movies or even what they pull off the video game. They need to have new stuff in the pipeline. They need to be growing. The brand needs to be getting bigger. And if it's not, they'll drop it. They've been dropping a lot of stuff. The only reason they haven't dropped this is because this has been one of their biggest things. But if they can't make it one of their biggest things again with the TV show, assuming it happens, they'll let it go. And I just thought it was interesting to think about and talk through where things are at for this property, largely in terms of like adaptations and money-making potential. Like creatively, I think the property has done whatever it was going to do that was worth having. Because as I said, I didn't think the first Fantastic Beasts was great. I really thought the second one was a mess. I didn't see the third one, but you know, the original series is beloved and will remain so. The original movies are beloved and will remain so. But that's a complete story. And it's unlike, say, the comic book related stuff where you can always adapt another specific story. You can always adapt another era. This is just the one story. And the spin-offs didn't work. We'll see where it goes. And whether or not I'll ever talk about it again, I don't know. I'll probably be watching out of morbid curiosity if this moves forward for things like casting, directors, showrunners, etc. I won't watch it if it happens. Let's be very clear about that. For the reasons I already mentioned about Ms. Rowling. But we're not going back down that rabbit hole. I've said my piece now on Harry Potter itself and on the potential for a TV series. What are your thoughts on any of this? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, allows me to do this as my living, even if you can't help me out that way. Although, there's nice things. There's early access to videos. There's a Discord. There's stuff like that. But even if you can't, like, share, subscribe, help me out. But what I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary people are non-binary, and this council is adjourned. My thanks to all my patrons, but in particular, I want to thank Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Sarvis, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Imudelki, Leotha Boyd, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Fernambulax the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Tim Price, Adam RDL Taylor, Goddess Alida, I'm not sure, David Hall, Shayla Gourlay, Rosalind Bennett. You want to hear me mess up your name too? It's in the Patreon perks. I gotta work on that.